H1Bs are critical to America. And I believe this has been done in haste. It's probably a colossal mistake. The United States just does not produce high quality, high skilled engineering graduates.
A big breaking story that Indians woke up to was a huge change in the H1B visas. And joining us for more on that is Chidanand Rajghatta from the US. It's still very early. We've just seen the notification come out, but there is already panic. How should one look at this?
This debate has been going on about H1B for some time. And in December last year, Elon Musk, you know, of Tesla, SpaceX, etc., had actually tweeted about this when somebody asked him about, H1B and whether we should, can it. He said, and I'm going to read out his response to somebody who questioned this. This is Elon Musk on December 27th. The reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H1B. Take a big step back and F yourself in the face. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. So, this was Elon Musk last December. He's been quiet in the hours since this was announced. I haven't seen him say anything, and it's entirely possible that he's turned totally MAGA. But I know for a fact one of the first text messages I received after this was announced was somebody who had worked in Tesla who said, if this comes through, the entire IT department and supply chain in Tesla and numerous other companies will get wiped out. Uh, you know, uh, it's because H1Bs are critical to America. And I believe this has been done in haste. It's probably a colossal mistake. I can understand why it's been done. There has been pressure on the Trump administration to do this by a very, very small but very vocal section of MAGA activists, online activists mainly, who've been campaigning that, oh, H1Bs are stealing our jobs. And most of it is directed against Indians because about 70% of all H1B visas go to people of Indian origin. Also, there's a misunderstanding that all H1Bs are tech people. No, actually H1Bs go across the spectrum, and in fact, at any given time, there are about 10,000 physicians, medical graduates who are on H1B, and a lot of them serve in rural America, in underserved areas in boondocks America, and they're absolutely critical to the American healthcare system. There are also H1Bs in finance, for instance. There are financial companies, there are accounting companies. You have Accenture, Ernst and Young. A lot of them use H1Bs, and not just for H1B people, visa holders to come and live here and take American jobs. H1Bs are used for back and forth. There are H1B visa holders who actually come here, either train people or learn and go back and execute their skills from back in India. So it's not the idea that somehow H1Bs come here and take American jobs is absolute poppycock. I expect legal challenges and industry pushback over the weekend going into Monday.
So when the executive order says that H1B visas will now need like an entry fee of 100,000 US dollars, what was the fee like earlier with the lottery system? And is this for all those starting from the 21st of September, or is it also going to apply to everyone?
I think it's no, it's for renewals. I think if you already have H1B visa and you're in the US and your H1B is good till, it's usually given for 3 years, and then there's a 3 year extension. It's a 3+3 year system, and then a lot of people by then apply for change of status going into green card. So I think they're okay. Uh, if your H1B is up for renewal, let's say, for instance, I spoke to somebody whose H1B ends in December, and then is up for renewal. Uh, then the 100,000 dollar fee kicks in, and it's not even that you have to pay. The H1B holder has to pay. From what I heard Commerce Secretary Lutning say in the White House today, it's they expect the corporations, they expect the employers to pay. right? So if you're on an H1B, so let's look at let's say the top 10 H1 companies applying for H1Bs in the US. I saw I think four of them are companies, Indian companies or companies with strong ties to India. That's TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and Cognizant. But then there are five, six other companies which are American or global corporations. There's Google, there's Microsoft, there's, I guess, Tesla, IBM, Accenture. Uh, so they, the idea, as Lutnick and Trump spelt out, is that if the corporations want H1Bs and if they are so good and so vital to their operations, then the corporations will pay, right? In principle, that sounds fine because then you're weeding out, graduates or H1B holders who are not highly skilled, who are not, vital, the so-called body shoppers, which is the MAGA crowd complains about, and you're only letting in really smart, critical people. That's in principle that sounds okay. But what it does is there are two things that happen here. One, the Googles and Microsofts and Teslas can afford the 100K tab, but maybe it does not make sense for Infosys or smaller companies to pay so much because they're essentially sending H1Bs to execute their projects, let's say, right? So it pushes, it tilts the whole field in favor of big corporations, in favor of the elite corporations who have deep pockets, who are highly valued, uh, and so the system is skewed. The other impact I see is it's it's not like they want to hire sort of smart, really smart people and geniuses. There's already another category of visa for really smart people. It's called the O visa, and then there's for wealthy people. There's the EB, 5. So smart, wealthy people have other means of coming into US, and for that matter, I mean, if you have, if you're going to pay, 5 million for a gold card, or 1 million, for whatever the
Yeah, the Trump
Trump
gold card. Yeah.
gold card, it means you have millions in the bank. You can afford to pay, uh, and people with millions in the bank would happily live anywhere else in the world, in Dubai, in Singapore, in India, China. I don't see why they'd want to come to us. But there's another issue here. H1B or young people who come through that route and eventually become American green card holders in American, they're not already geniuses, who when they come in, they're, I mean, it's amazing. So if you look at let's say the top 5 or 10 US corporations, most valued corporations, a lot of them came, I mean, Elon Musk himself or Satya Nadella or Sundar Pichai of Google, they all came here as young students, graduated from here, they were on a student visa, then they got their H1B, eventually it became green card. So it was not like they were geniuses when they came to the America is what made them, right? And as Musk says, eventually he created enormous wealth and two, three fantastic companies, and employed hundreds of thousands of people, as did Microsoft and Google. And so these are people who came as regular H1Bs and created wealth. So the idea that somehow you will get in only yeah, sure, you can get in, a genius or a Nobel laureate or somebody or a prospective Nobel laureate on this 100,000 fee and so on, and he might create breakthroughs. But really, people who create, big companies and big enterprises and uh, all these guys, Satya and Sundar came here as engineering graduates and went to business school and learned how to build and run companies, right? So the idea of we'll get in only smart people and big corporations will pay top dollar to get these geniuses or people who are critically required, it is a totally a poppycock theory. I expect this thing won't work. for very long.
In the executive order, it talks about how companies have been hiring and then firing, and these jobs could have gone to Americans. There's that whole argument that is made at the beginning of that executive order to talk about how these jobs are being taken away from Americans who could potentially fill those, and you're finding cheaper options elsewhere. And that's an argument that sort of is built.
Yes. So look, like I said from at the beginning, is there has there been abuse of H1B visa system? Yes. Okay, there are a lot of companies which have gamed this, and they send in people, but this is not a fault of the H1B visa holders. This is a fault of the companies. So prosecute them or enforce your laws. And when you graduate from college, when your student F1 visa becomes an OPT, is optional practical training of 1 year, and in some cases 3 years. And then during your training period, you get a job. You apply, and if you get a job, the your employer processes your H1B visa. So out of the 85, there's 85,000 annual H1B visas granted. 20,000 are for students who graduate from US colleges, and then 65 is what comes in from abroad. By the way, so out of this 85,000, about 70% actually goes to Indian students, people of Indian origin. And there are others, Chinese and Canadians, Germans from all over the world, Russians, who have the other 30%. So yeah, this argument has been prevalent for a long time. In fact, it started during Trump's first term, where there were a bunch of MAGA, I call them MAGA online warriors, in the tech sector, who agitated and kept up a relentless campaign saying, "Oh, Indians are stealing jobs." I mean, that is absolutely not true. The fact is, the United States does not graduate enough engineering or medical graduates, or in critical sectors, to meet its needs. I mean, this is so obvious. The other day when Tim Cook was in the White House, and he produced this new glass, Corning glass, which he said is going to be manufactured in the U.S., and he announced that it's going to be made in a place called Harrodsburg in Kentucky, where Corning has a factory. This is a new Gorilla Glass, so the next generation of iPhones. It's even tougher glass, which will be made here. And I looked up Harrodsburg. I vaguely had remembered being that part of the country, and I know it's a small town of about 10,000 people. And this is, I think, the investment is in the billions of dollars. And I kept wondering, I mean, where are they going to get engineers, for this facility in a town of 10,000? You go to any engineering school, whether it's materials engineering or electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, you go to any engineering school, there are just not enough Americans graduating. Most of them, the class, like half of them are Asians. They're Indians, Chinese, Vietnamese, Koreans. Not enough people, native born Americans, and that's been obvious for a long time. 20 years ago, and I can give you this very vivid example. I ran into Tom Kalat, is a very distinguished professor emeritus of electrical engineering at Stanford. He's of Indian origin. He was originally from Pune. And Professor Kalat told me at that time, he had graduated 75 PhDs at that time, right? Which was actually a lot. And about 50 or 60 of his first 50, 60 PhDs were all mostly white native born Americans. His last 10 were all Rao, Sharma, Singh, Zhang, Isfahani, Ji, all Asians, right? So in American higher education, and anybody can go to a college campus and see this, okay, the United States just does not produce high quality, high skilled engineering graduates. I'm not talking of the slave labor which these guys are complaining about. Forget that. But really skilled graduates are in short supply, which is how the whole H1B program began. But the idea that big corporations or wealthy people can buy their way into the US by paying 100,000 or 1 million or 5 million, I don't know. It just sounds completely batty to me.
You said that there is you understand the panic, but you also feel that maybe there is no need to panic. So, how should India really look at this? Because currently, everyone who's sort of reading about this is thinking this is going to be a problem.
Yes, I mean, look, like I said, it'll take a couple of days for things to, become clear. Like I said, I expect there'll be a legal challenges. I expect the industry to challenge it. But in the long term, look, the fact is, things have become increasingly difficult for immigrants and even for people who travel to the US. This is a country which is where you hear the creaking of the doors being shut. It's like a garage, where somebody's pulling it down to shut down. And I believe a lot of countries and a lot of individuals will reassess whether they really need to go to the US. Yeah, it's the education system, the higher education is fantastic, and there are no greater colleges than Stanford or MIT or Harvard. But the fact is, if you have to jump through so many hoops to make it here, and you're living in constant stress and tension and worrying about rule changes and costs and so on, I mean, people will start looking at other options, at Singapore or Europe or India itself, which now has many fine universities. And President Trump himself has said, "Oh, people go away, they study here and go away and build wealth in their home countries." Yes, if you make it so hard, for them to be here, they will stay. They will go back. And so, I mean, the Chinese have already done it. Actually, the entire Chinese, the revolution in their tech industry and the enterprise is all because they started, going back or staying back. And so, in some ways, this might work out pretty well for India. Yeah, sure, we'll lose, what, 50 billion in remittances, but there'll be other gains. And sort of nationally, I don't think uh, we should, worry. If anything, I just feel that the U.S. has made a colossal blunder. It'll shoot itself. It's shooting itself in the foot, and there may be a reappraisal. And if there isn't, well, like I said, this is the age of MAGA, and if the idea of MAGA is to shut down the gates, close the gates, uh, and try and do it yourself, they might find out pretty soon that it's hard. The whole the globalization horse is already left. You can't sort of pull it back, right? The I mean, 20 what was it, 25 years ago, a lot of x-rays, for instance, in the generated in US hospitals and clinics, were being read in India for very simple reason, two reasons actually. One, the US just did not produce enough radiologists, to read and interpret the x-rays. Two, it's a 24-hour cycle, so the doctors here at the end of the day, they send all the Massachusetts General Hospital sends its x-rays to Bangalore to some company, Wipro or Wipro Medical, I think at that time it was, and it's read and sent back overnight. When it's day here again, right? It worked brilliantly. Right now, are you going to complain that uh, you know our jobs are being taken away? Or no, it's an efficient system. Plus, you don't have enough radiologists here. And this worked in many areas. A lot of accounting firms, for instance, there are a lot of consultancy firms. 24 hour. If you remember, Tom Friedman wrote this book, I think, called what, The Flat Earth or
The
something like
world
that.
is flat.
The world is flat. Yeah, right. Simply because of this principle, right? So we are now at a situation where the United States complains about job loss. Uh, on the one hand, they don't want you know factories or production to move to foreign countries, to India or Vietnam or China. On the other hand, you don't want them to come here and work. And there's all this bogey about illegal and millions of people from prisons and all kinds of thing. And then you see there are 400 South Koreans who are working on a Hyundai plant trying to get you guys up to speed, being handcuffed and
And shackled.
thrown back, deported. It's a holy mess.
I actually wanted to ask you, I want to ask you about your own experience, the time that you came into the US, how things were then in terms of just how people viewed Indians, and now how that change has, how you've seen a change over time, and, how even the way people are looking at the Indian diaspora has that changed.
Yeah. So I came here in the early 90s, 93, 94. In fact, the H1B program kicked off, I think, in 1990, if I'm not mistaken. And the early years, I mean, nobody really gave it much attention. It kind of picked up steam, I think, towards the end of the decade when there was that Y2. I don't know if people remember the Y2K crisis when the
Y2K,
US.
yes.
And then at the turn of the century, you could literally see the number of sort of Indian population almost doubling every decade, people of Indian origin in the US. And also number of college admissions. At that time, it was, I think, annually 30,000 or so, and it kept increasing very rapidly. And through the 2000s, look, that was the rara time of globalization. The roaring 90s or the nifty 90s, whatever you want to call it. It was the birth of the internet era. I still remember the first browsers just came. There was an original browser called Mosaic, which became Netscape, and there was Netscape 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and then Microsoft Explorer, and also the computers, became faster, slimmer. It was a boom time, and there were a lot of foreign graduates who came here first to study, and then graduated, and eventually became got their H1B and green card, and Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai are among them, right? These are graduates of the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, who added value to the United States. Remember, it was the United States which dragged the rest of the world kicking and screaming into this whole globalization business, right? Kicking and screaming. We were really, and then having done that, they now find that, and this is the larger immigration story I want to emphasize. It's not special to United States. It's all over the world, and in fact, even within countries, there is a general principle: immigrants work hard, harder than native born people, even within India, for instance. You go to Bangalore, and you have Biharis and Odiyas, who come in and they work 18 hours a day, and the native Kannadigas or elsewhere, the native Maharashtrians, they are more relaxed. They've lived there for 100, 200 years, generations, and they're more relaxed, and the immigrants work hard. So there's this black backlash and resentment against immigrants. That's true everywhere in the world, and that's pretty much what happened in the US too. And remember, over the last 20 years, Indians have become wildly successful in the US. This is a very well-known statistic that the median income of Indian American families in the US is almost twice the national average. It's higher than native-born Americans, higher than Chinese Americans, Taiwanese Americans, Jewish Americans, and nobody comes anywhere close. And so it just tells you that it's a hugely successful community, and it's built on solid education. Frequently, both parents sort of being home and taking care of home and kids. It often support from grandparents. So it became not just model minority at a particular point in time, and I believe this probably started about 8 or 10 years ago during the Trump first term. There was a great deal of envy, right? And people started, and there were times when I wondered, and I said this, I think I wrote about this too. We risk becoming victims of our own success, because when your median income is so high, home ownership, for instance, which is a big thing in America. Most Indians, immigrants, sometimes even when they are still on their H1B visa, because it takes a long time for Indians to get onto the green card, to get a green card, they buy homes. They are homeowners when they're still H1B visa holders. And many of them, they are in H1B, and the kids are born here, the kids are citizens. So it is, in general, it's a community over the last 30, 40 years which has done well. I'd say spectacularly well. And I always thought there'd come a day when there could be, we could be victims of our own success, and I think in some ways that's happened.
Is that how you would also see this? What is becoming difficult to sort of interpret? On the one hand, President Trump is saying Prime Minister Modi is my great friend, my good friend, and then India gets slapped with tariffs, and he says he's a really good leader, and then India gets another, the Chabahar port announcement.
Yeah, so I actually said, you should take this, friendship talk, we're great friends, my great friend, with a fistful of bicarbonate. There is no friendship. There is no dosti among world leaders. Because, President Obama and Prime Minister Modi also called each other great friend, my friend. In fact, they addressed each other as Barack and Narendra one time. I remember it was like cringe. You think they're calling each other now and wishing each other happy birthday? No, Obama is done. So there's no friendship. Every leader, fights for the, in the interest of his country, and so they should. And um, right now, the American ethos, as reflected by President Trump, is "Make America Great Again," and that is his sole motto. It doesn't matter. Allies don't matter, partners don't matter, friendship doesn't matter. It's not just India he's singling out. Yeah, in the last 3 days or last week, he's socked it a few times with this Chabar thing, with the H1B and so on. But this is not India specific. I mean, here's a guy who just, you know, completely brought a wrecking ball to Canada, relations with Canada and Mexico. Canada, can you believe it? The United States is the luckiest country in the world in terms of its geography. Okay, there is no country which is protected by two oceans, large oceans on the east and west, and two very benign countries, north and south. You can't get luckier than this, right? And he goes and erects ties with Canada, with Mexico, with Europe. I mean, there. So, and his entire mindset is make America great again. Doesn't matter what it takes, what friendships, we will bust. And he's busted friendships with, Japan, with South Korea now. It's just incredible. It's actually fascinating, if you're a student of history and geopolitics. These are, to put it very mildly, interesting times. And so, like I said, it's not India specific. I can understand that we are also, I think, in the Indian public opinion is fairly sensitive and sort of hyper. The government, I'm glad to see, has reacted in a more calm and measured way, and that's the way to go about it, because these are, passing phases in history. You have to remember that India, at its weakest, at some of its weakest moments, you go back to 1970, right? Um, India's GDP was, I think, 60 billion at that time. It was something, it was very pathetic, less than 100 billion. And India of 1970 stood up to the US and its, Seventh Fleet and all that during the war for the liberation of Bangladesh. And even into the 90s, when our GDP was still less than a trillion, uh, India stood up. The nuclear test, for
Yes, in
instance,
Pokhran,
in
right.
'98. So this is not a country which is going to roll over. I think we have a very strong sort of moral and ethical uh, streak in us, also a stubborn streak. We're not going to be sort of uh, run over. So I guess it's an attitude which comes from 5,000 years of existence, civilization. It's like this too shall pass, kind of thing. And I expect we will navigate this. Like I said, look, this might not last, you know, for long, much less forever, because I think there will be a realization at some point in the United States that you can't wing it alone. This is a country built on immigrant enterprise, not just Indian. It's taken all kinds of immigrants, and some of the people in power are themselves, children of immigrants, including the president himself.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, but obviously, we'll keep tracking this story and other stories with you closely. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ketaki.